What's going on, guys? I'm coming at you today with my recap of Week 2 in the 2012 NFL season. And first off, I've been doing my picks and stuff, and I've enjoyed talking about a lot more NFL stuff, and I've been watching games on NFL Game Rewind and just following the game very close this year, closer than I ever have, although I've been a big NFL fan for quite some time. But my picks last week were about as poor as they could have been, and hopefully that is my worst week of the season because it was awful. My picks last week, I was really confident in them too, and then just nothing went my way, especially in the early games. So I'm going to recap Week 2 hopefully and move on from this week and hopefully have a much better Week 3 as far as my picks and predictions go. And so in Week 2, we did see a good handful of upsets, and I predicted some upsets in my predictions, and none of those actually ended up being true. And overall, during the week, over the course of 16 games, only 2 teams on the road actually got a victory, and one of those teams was the Arizona Cardinals, who were able to get a 2-point victory after Stephen Gostkowski missed a 42-yard field goal. But the week started out, I made a prediction video and previewed the matchup on Thursday Night Football, like I probably will again this week, with the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers. And I thought Chicago looked decent in Week 1. I wasn't overly impressed, but I thought their offense had really improved and their defense would be good, which their defense was good in this game against Green Bay, but their offense, it was horrible, and it didn't help that Matt Forte had to leave with an ankle injury. So Chicago lost that game. I predicted a victory for them, so I was already off to an 0-1 start. And then on to the early games on Sunday where nothing went right for me at all. We got KC at Buffalo, and Buffalo really surprised me this week after being beaten pretty well by the Jets last week, but CJ Spiller, he's the NFL leading rusher right now. He had a big week, and fantasy owners reaped the benefits of his Week 2 performance against the Kansas City Chiefs, and they got the victory this week by a score of 35-17, and now Buffalo is 1-1 on the season. On to New Orleans and Carolina. I thought there was no way that Drew Brees would allow that team to go 0-2, and I wasn't all that impressed with the Carolina offense in Week 1, especially the rushing attack, but they got their offense rolling in this week with Cam Newton and the rushing attack. D'Angelo Williams and Mike Tolbert had a touchdown, and it was a much improved performance for them overall, and Drew Brees had a couple of bad throws in that game, one being an early pick six to Charles Godfrey. They almost came back in the end, but Carolina held off for a 35-27 win, so I was already 0-3 on the day. Then on to Cleveland and Cincinnati. I predicted a Cincinnati victory, which they did get the victory after Brandon Weeden really bounced back this week, and Trent Richardson also played very well. But Cincinnati was able to hold on, and they got the victory this week by a score of 34-27. And then on to Minnesota at Indianapolis. I predicted a Minnesota victory. I really like their chances in this game, especially with some of the injuries that the Colts had, whereas the Vikings aren't missing any starters. The Colts were without Dwight Freeney and Pat Angerer and 2 guys in the offensive line. They lost their center Samson Sattelli in this game, and the Vikings could not get enough pressure at Andrew Luck. Whenever he did, he was able to flush out of the pocket. He had a very good day throwing. It was very accurate, and the Vikings really should have been dominated in this game, but they were able to come back thanks to a lucky play towards the end, and then they had another touchdown later after that. But the Vikings lost this game by a field goal, and so I was 1-4 after these games. And then Houston and Jacksonville, and here was my bonehead move of the week. I picked Jacksonville in an upset victory. I thought their offense was much more balanced in Week 1, and their defense was pretty good. They were able to hang tough with the Houston Texans last year, never lost for more than 10 points to them. And after Houston beat Miami pretty handedly in Week 1 and they were going on the road to Jacksonville, I thought that the Jaguars could catch the Texans napping, but they were definitely prepared in this game, and my big upset did not come through with me this week. So the Texans won that game 27-7. Blaine Gabbert threw for 53 yards and he got hurt in this game, and so not what I expected from the Jaguars. And then Oakland at Miami. I wanted to go with Miami and change my pick at the last second before I made that video, but I stuck with Oakland because I trusted their defense to stop the Miami offense. And that certainly did not happen, and that Oakland offense is not looking very good this year. I thought they'd be pretty good with Carson Palmer and Darren McFadden, but Reggie Bush ran all over him in this game, and Lamar Miller also had a touchdown on the ground. I believe they had 3 rushing touchdowns. And for this Oakland defense to allow Miami to score 35 points on them, that is not good. And the Raiders are not looking like a very strong team this year at all. After I thought they would be a decent team, maybe go 8-8 again, or maybe 7-9. But the Dolphins got the victory this week, and the Raiders fall to 0-2 after a 35-13 defeat in Sun Life Stadium. On to one of the bigger surprises of the week, Arizona at New England. I saw a lot of people making their prediction for the Cardinals to have the upset in this game, and I know the Cardinals have a pretty good defense, but I did not think they could stop a twin tight end scheme that the Patriots like to run so much. But Aaron Hernandez got hurt early in this game, Tom Brady wasn't throwing the ball very well, and the Arizona defense really stepped up, and they held the Patriots to under 20 points, a team that usually scores quite a bit. And the Cardinals got a victory, 20-18, of course, after Gostkowski missed a 42-yard field goal to potentially be the game-winning field goal. And so that was another loss for me. I had one win up until this point, and it's not done yet. By the way, I went 4-12 overall. That is horrible. I should never lose this many games, but I had some really bad picks. And so this week I got to bounce back because I can't do that again. On to Tampa Bay at New York Giants. I predicted a Tampa Bay upset, and they almost pulled it off. They were in control of this game for a majority of it. Eli Manning threw, I believe, 3 first-half interceptions, but then he decided to throw 500 yards on them and blasted an 80-yard touchdown to Victor Cruz that helped out my fantasy team. And then Hakeem Nicks, I believe, had almost 200 receiving yards, and they pulled off the victory in the end, 41-34. And so that's another loss for me on this week. And then on to Baltimore at Philadelphia. These teams are polar opposites in Week 1. Baltimore was lights out, and Philadelphia barely held on to get their victory against the Browns. But Flacco wasn't as sharp this week, and Michael Vick came through in the end once again, and they got a victory, 24-23, meaning that I still only had one predicted game correct at this point. And there were just so many close games, and I thought I was going to do so much better. But on to Dallas at Seattle. Seattle got the victory in this one pretty handily. They got off to an early lead. I believe they had a punt blocked for a touchdown, and it was 27-7. The Cowboys' offense did not get going. Seattle has a very good defense and a very underrated secondary with some very good players in it. And I'm interested to see how they play against the Packers this week with that very good secondary and the Packers' passing attack. But Romo didn't do much in this game, and the Cowboys only scored 7 points, and Seattle got off to an early lead, and they held it for the entire game. So I was wrong in this game too. I love Dallas in Week 1. They look like a very complete team and a very complete defense overall. But that layover after that Wednesday night game, that may have had something to do with their loss. The Seahawks, but the Seahawks are a pretty good team. And I had offensive concerns about them from Week 1, but I expected the Cowboys to score a lot more than 7 points, so Seattle gets that victory. Then on to Washington and St. Louis. Robert Griffin III, after his impressive Week 1 performance. The Skins got out to an early lead in this one, but Danny Amendola, actually, he stole a show in the receiving game, having over half of Sam Bradford's passing yards. He threw for 310, by the way, and I thought this Washington defense would do a little bit better against this Rams offense. They also had a backup running back come in for Steven Jackson, and he played very well. But the Rams did get their first win on the season with head coach Jeff Fisher by a score of 31-28. And so there's a lot of one-on-one teams, by the way. There's 20 now, I believe, which is like an NFL record. And now I had that game wrong, by the way. I picked RG3 and the Redskins. On to the Jets and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And now this is one of the predictions I got right. And I would call this one of my unique predictions, not only because it was unique because it actually was right, but because I looked at it a little bit differently. I saw the Jets play very well on offense in Week 1, but I knew that the Pittsburgh Steelers defense was very strong and Sanchez would have some trouble, and I thought that the Jets offense would slow down and the Steelers would get the victory, which they did. They got it by a score of, we look at it here, I remember, 27-10. And for a lot of my other predictions, I made the mistake of going like based on the Week 1 performances, how they would have played against each other, like Baltimore against Philadelphia. Well, obviously Baltimore played much better in Week 1, but I carried on too much of that success and assumed it would all continue for too many of the teams this week. So that's a mistake I can't make again next week if I want to actually get some right. I had 4 right this week, which is just awful. I still can't believe I only got 4 right. But I guess I made some horrible picks this week, and I definitely can't do much worse. But Pittsburgh got the victory this week after slowing down that Jets offense. I believe they didn't even complete a pass to a wide receiver after the first quarter until it was pretty much over. Pittsburgh played very good, and they were able to hold off the Jets and go to 1-1 on the year. And then I got another one right here, San Diego over Tennessee. Basically, they dominated this game from the very beginning, and they had tight end Dante Rosario catch 3 touchdowns after I believe Antonio Gates was out of this game. He was inactive. And they got the victory 38-10, and the Titans are looking very good right now, especially running back Chris Johnson, who has eclipsed double digits finally. He now has 21 yards, and his yards per carry is about as good as my predictions this week. On to Detroit at San Francisco. I predicted a San Francisco victory. I thought their defense was too much for the Lions, and Stafford wasn't all that lights out in Week 1, and so I thought if they could blanket Megatron and take him out of this game and at least not let him get too many big plays down the field, they would have a very good shot at winning, and they did by a score of 27-19. Vernon Davis had 2 touchdowns in this game, my fantasy football tight end, and the Lions had a chance towards the end, but they could not get their defense off the field on 3rd down. Michael Crabtree was making catches, and they just could not stop him when it mattered. And now, finally, the Monday Night Football matchup last night, the Denver Broncos and the Atlanta Falcons. I picked Denver, although Matt Ryan in the Georgia Dome, what was I thinking? I thought Peyton Manning was good in Week 1. I expected him to be great this week against a secondary that was without Brent Grimes now for the rest of the season. But Peyton Manning threw 3 picks on his first 3 drives. I did not predict that. And they also had a fumble later with Noshawn Marino. That was a complete massacre of officiating, and there was no rules involved in this game pretty much. The refs were terrible. But Matt Ryan was once again very efficient, and the Broncos almost came through in the end. I knew Peyton Manning would have a shot, but the 3rd down defense could not hold the Atlanta Falcons. Julio Jones had a very clutch catch. That was on 3rd down. I thought the Broncos were going to get the last shot for Peyton Manning to win the game, but they lost by 6, 27-21. And then after the game, a few hours later, Michael Turner decides to get a DUI. And so we'll see what happens with that situation. But I'm playing against him in fantasy this week, so I think I'm already winning, even though we haven't even played any games yet. And so yeah, that concludes basically the recap of Week 2 in the NFL season. I did not predict the games very well this week, especially the early games. Only had 1 right, and then I picked it up towards the end of the week. But 4-12, we're shooting for the stars this week. Hopefully I have a good rebounding week for me in picks. I'll have that video up probably on Saturday again. I'll preview the Thursday Night Football matchup. And I'll also have a video probably tomorrow where I detail my Week 2 in fantasy and preview my Week 3. And despite how poorly I predicted the games for Week 2, I was able to dominate my fantasy football matchup, and I was the leading scorer this week thanks to Victor Cruz and Vernon Davis on my team. But anyways, guys, that concludes the video. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys later. Have a great day.